Everything is meaningless. Those words come straight from the Bible. And they were written by a guy who we're told was the wisest man that would ever live. Well, if everything is meaningless, then why are we here? What's the point of everything? Well, join me as we look and we dive deep into the words that King Solomon wrote thousands of years ago as he looked out and just observed everything that was taking place on the earth. I'm Steve, lead pastor of Everrise Church, and you're watching Rising, our weekly running devotion series where we talk about things going on in the culture, we talk about the Bible, how we can apply it to our everyday lives. Thanks for tuning in. Stick around. All right, welcome back from the intro. So I just want to start by saying that today's devotion really stems from a real life encounter that I had with somebody this past weekend. You see, it was Sunday afternoon. We had just finished with church and lunch and meeting with our leadership team, and we were headed home, and we decided to stop in by a store to get a quick little treat to enjoy when we got home. And while we were there was a gentleman that was behind the counter that was ringing us up and getting us all checked out and everything. And I just happened to ask him this very simple question that we typically ask people. I said, "Hey man, how's it going? How's your day?" Something along those lines, all right? And for once, I had somebody answer that question honestly. He said, it's actually quite terrible. And he began to kind of explain to me just the situation that had just happened to him, why he was so frustrated. And he stopped at one point because after he explained, I was just like, man, is there something that I can pray with you about? And he said, pray for some success. And then he stopped and he just kind of looked and he gestured just to everything around him. And he's like, there's got to be so much more than this. And he talked about how he looks out and he sees the way things are going and the things are being run and just what little hope there really seems to be in this world. And he's just like I can't believe this is what we're working towards. And I had to agree with him completely. When we look around and we see things going on, we see what's happening in politics, we see what's happening with the economy, we see what's happening with the housing market, we see what's happening in our school systems, we see violence and crime increasing. We look at everything that's going on in this country, in the world around us, all the wars, all the striving, trying to get ahead, never quite feeling like you're able to get there. And if you look at that and you don't ask yourself, why am I doing this? What's the point of all this? Well, then you're probably just going through life head down like a zombie because you realized it's not going to do any good to think about that. But I'd like to challenge that way of thinking. You see, because this gentleman that I ran into at the store that was ringing us up, I'm going to say that he's 100% right. This is not what it's supposed to be like. This can't be as good as life gets. Just trying to get through life, trying to get a good paying job, trying to raise a family, trying to work towards retirement. Yeah, there's got to be so much more to life than just what we so typically work for and strive for. And we're not the only ones to ever question that and to ever think through that. This gentleman that I ran into, he is certainly not the first person to just be like, what's the point of everything? And as he was explaining this and as he was going through this, I just could not help but to think about the book of Ecclesiastes that we find in the pages of the Old Testament. And honestly, it might be my favorite book in the entire Bible. Because as we look at Ecclesiastes, what we see the son of David, King Solomon, writing down all of his thoughts as he is processing everything that happens in the world and just the point behind why we're here and why we do the things that we do. And he comes to a very, very short, abrupt conclusion at the end of his book, but it takes him all 12 chapters before he finally gets to his last couple of sentences, where he finally shares and shows this is what life is about. This is the most important thing. But as he's starting, I just want to read the first few verses of chapter 1, and then we'll go through, and I'll make some highlights as we go through. So we're not going to read through the entire thing. This video would be way too long if we did that. But listen to how King Solomon starts off the book of Ecclesiastes. So in chapter 1, verse 1, it says this: "The words of the teacher, son of David, king in Jerusalem. Meaningless, meaningless, says the teacher, utterly meaningless. Everything is meaningless. What do people gain from all their labors at which they toil under the sun? Generations come, generations go, but the earth remains forever. The sun rises, the sun sets, and hurries back to where it rises. The wind blows to the south, it blows to the north, round and round it goes, ever returning on its course. All streams flow into the sea, yet the sea is never full. To the place the streams come from, there they return again. All things are wearisome, more than one can say. The eye never has enough of seeing, nor the ear its fill of hearing. What has been will be again. What has been done will be done again. There is nothing new under the sun. Is there anything of which one can say, look, this is something new? It was here already long ago. It was here before our time. No one remembers the former generations, and even those yet to come will not be remembered by those who follow them." Well, if he's trying to if he's trying to start the beginning of an encouraging speech, he pretty much failed right out of the gate. Not very encouraging words by someone who is recorded as being the wisest man who would ever live. Everything is meaningless. There's no point to anything. That's what King Solomon arrives to. That's what he's thinking through. That's what he's trying to process as he just looks out and he evaluates and he uses his wisdom and his experiences, and he's just like, why? Why are we here? What are we doing? And as he continues this train of thought, the rest of the entire book of Ecclesiastes is basically him just processing that main idea, that foredrawn conclusion that everything is meaningless. And he goes, and in the first 11 verses of chapter 2, he talks and he describes and explains in detail why pleasure is meaningless, and how we are often in pursuit of things that bring us joy, that bring us happiness, that bring us pleasure. And he says at the end of the day that that's meaningless because we're never satisfied with everything. We're always wanting more. Then he goes, and in verses 12 through 16 in chapter 2, he talks about how wisdom is meaningless. A lot of us try to strive for just trying to gain all the information, all the wisdom that we can. And at the end of the day, Solomon says the wise person and the foolish person, we all suffer the same fate. We all eventually come to die. He continues in verses 17 through 26 of chapter 2, and he's like, all of our work and our toil, all of our hard work, that's meaningless, because we're constantly striving and striving and striving, and we're trying to get ahead. We're trying to accumulate everything that we can. And then what happens when we come to the end of our life? We die, and it just goes to somebody else, somebody that didn't have to work for it, somebody that is not going to understand and appreciate it as much as we do. So even that's meaningless. And then in chapter 4, he says something that really just seems kind of very emo and cryptic. In chapter 4, verses 2 through 3, this is what he says. "And I declared that the dead who already died are happier than the living who are still alive. But better than both is the one who was never born, who has not seen the evil that is done under the sun." Do y'all hear that? What he's basically saying is to die means that we're actually happier because we're no longer suffering in this world. But even more blessed and happy than the person who's dead is the one who was never born, because they never had to experience all the trials and tribulations and suffering that we have to go through in this world. Not very encouraging, is it? As a matter of fact, it really paints a bleak picture of our existence, of humanity, of this world. He continues on, and in chapter 5, he says, Riches are meaningless. In other words, all we do is we try to gather, like we already said, we try to gather a lot of stuff. We try to get money. We think if I have enough wealth, if I have enough money, that'll bring happiness, that'll bring me joy, that'll bring me fulfillment, it'll provide the lifestyle that I want to live. And what Solomon says is, look, the more money we get, the more we just want to spend. We can't ever out earn our capacity to spend what we get. And so we're constantly in the pursuit and in the need of trying to get more and more and more. And I think all of us can see that that is a truth and a reality that takes place in our world today. He continues and he talks about how even being righteous, at the end of the day, it's meaningless because the righteous people still get what the wicked people deserve. In chapter 8, verse 14, that's exactly what he says. He says, there is something else meaningless that occurs on earth. The righteous who get what the wicked deserve, and the wicked who get what the righteous deserve. This too, I say, is meaningless. I think we can see that. We see good people who we think, good things should happen to, but at the end of the day, bad things happen to them. And we see people that we would assume and say, man, that person, I hope they get what they deserve. And what ends up happening? They have a lot of things. They get blessed, it would look like, right? And so Solomon is just like, even trying to do the right thing just seems meaningless when you look at everything. And lastly, he says being young, youthfulness is meaningless in in chapter 11, verses 9 through 10. You see, because a lot of us, as we age and as we get older, we're like, oh man, just to be young again. If I could just have my youthfulness, if I could feel good, if I could move like I used to, if my brain would work the way it would, that'd be good. And Solomon says, no, that's meaningless too. Because at the end of the day, whether you're young or you're old, God's going to bring all of us into judgment. And so as Solomon is just thinking and writing down all of his thoughts about just what is the purpose of everything, over and over and time again, he comes to the conclusion that all of it, everything that we pursue, everything that we go after, everything that we think is good or bad or good people or bad, like all of it, at the end of the day is meaningless because no one ever truly gets ahead. Life is not fair. And at the end of the day, we're all just working and stressing our lives away to eventually all just come to the same point when we breathe our last breath here on this planet. Man, what a depressing sentiment. But how many people going through this world today, experiencing their hardships and their struggles and just trying to figure out what's my purpose, what's the point of life, why are we here? A lot of these people come to the same conclusion. But Solomon also writes something else. The last two sentences that he pens down in this book, he finally and ultimately arrives at what is the point of being here. When it looks like everything just doesn't make sense, it's not worth it, life is just meaningless, he finally gets to his real conclusion. And this is what he says in his last two sentences. In chapter 12, verses 13 and 14. He says, now all has been heard. In other words, he's made his argument, he's made his case, right? Here is the conclusion of the matter. Fear God and keep his commandments, for this is the duty of all mankind. For God will bring every deed into judgment, including every hidden thing, whether it is good or evil. So as he looks out and evaluates everything that's happening on earth, everything that he sees and has witnessed and has experienced, ultimately he says, we are here for one reason and one reason only. That's to know God, to have a relationship with our Creator. Because if we just look to the things that this world has to offer, if we just try to follow and pursue all that this world does, we're going to be left empty. We're going to be left hopeless. And we're going to come to the conclusion that everything is just meaningless. What's the point? Why try? Why bother? But Solomon rightly gets to the point and gets to the fact that, you know what? This world doesn't make sense. There's a lot of things that are going to happen that even the wisest man on the planet cannot explain and cannot figure out and cannot justify. And so he finally reaches and arrives at the proper conclusion, and that is, what's the point? What should we focus on? What is our purpose in life? It's to enter into a relationship with the loving, caring, gracious, merciful, good Father and Creator of all of us. And when we do that, we're pursuing the right things, because what we see here on this planet, what takes place on earth, contrary to what a lot of people might think, is not the end. It is not our final resting place. Our souls will continue after we breathe our last breath on this planet, and we will be alive. We will be in existence well beyond what we see here on this planet, on this earth. And what we do during our time here determines how we're going to spend the rest of our time when we're no longer bound and constricted by the things on this earth. And if we want to make sure that we really experience life, if we really have purpose and meaning, especially once we leave this planet, well, then we better take the time to enter into a relationship with God and focus on that and let that be what we pursue and go after and what drives us as we have to go through and navigate the craziness of this world. And y'all, the only way that that can happen is by acknowledging Jesus Christ as God's Son, as your Lord and Savior, and accepting his sacrifice that he made when he died on that cross for the sins of all of mankind. And when we accept that, and we pursue him, and we enter into a relationship with Jesus Christ, for the first time ever, that is when we will experience our purpose and the meaning behind why we are here. And even then, it's not about us. It's not just this selfishness. Oh, I found the answer. I'm going to pursue Jesus, and that's good enough. No. Once we do discover what the purpose is, and we come to the same conclusion that Solomon did, that it's to fear God and keep his commandments, well, we have the duty and the responsibility, because God has invited us to be a part of his plan to help share that message with other people so that they too no longer have to go through this life filled with hopelessness and despair and frustration, but they too can experience true meaning and true purpose in this life. Because the reality is, Jesus Christ, thousands of years ago, walked this planet. He gave up perfection. He limited himself by coming in the form of a human. He lived a perfect life. He died on the cross for our sins, and God raised him from the dead after 3 days. That happened. And acknowledging that and accepting that is the only way that we can enter into this relationship with God and truly start living in our purpose and finding the meaning of why we are here on planet Earth to begin with. Now, I know, just some random guy sitting here talking to his phone may not be the most believable, and you may just think, whatever, he's just talking, he's just wasting his breath. But I promise you I'm not. God's word is true, and there is power in that word. And so I challenge you, if you have not made that decision, if you're still trying to figure out, is any of this even real? Is it just made up? Are we just wasting our time? For those of us who sit here and we talk about all this, I challenge you, genuinely, truly, sit there with an open mind. Ask God, if you're real, if you're there, show me. Show me who you are. Prove to me that what is written down in the Bible, your words, that they are true and they are real. And I promise you, if you do that with an open heart, with an open mind, and you are genuinely, truly trying to seek him and see and figure out if any of this is real, I promise you, he will make himself known to you. It may be through something you hear on the radio. It may be through another video that you watch. It may be another person that God brings into your life. And certainly, he's going to work in your heart and your mind as you spend time reading through his word. I promise you, he will do that. And if you are brave enough to take that step, to recognize the fact that just becoming a Christian doesn't mean your problems go away. It doesn't mean that all of a sudden everything in this life makes sense. It doesn't mean that you're just going to have an easy road for the rest of your life. But knowing that if you still choose to accept him into your heart and you say, you know what, I'm going to live for you, I'm going to pursue you, and I'm going to help teach and share your love and your truth with other people, I promise you, if you do that, you will find the meaning and the purpose that you have so desperately been looking for. So y'all, is life meaningless? No. No, life is not meaningless. There is a purpose and there is meaning behind why we are here. But we all have to figure that out. We all have to seek and search in our hearts and our souls and figure out, is God real? And is he calling me to come into a relationship with him? And when we do, all of a sudden, everything has new light. Everything has new meaning. It's not perfect. There's still lots of things that don't make sense, that I'll never understand and I can never explain. But it gives me a purpose, and it helps me understand what I'm supposed to do with my time here and the things that I'm supposed to focus on. And I wish the same for every single person that ever comes across this video. So y'all, if you're still here, thanks for sticking around. Thanks for making it to the end and watching this. And I truly, truly hope that this will prove to be something of great value to you